The folks over at the GFL are determined to sabotage the launch of their organization. I've already made a full breakdown of the GFL, but that was a month ago, and since then, things have kept getting worse. First off, the GFL's Twitter admin has been making a fool of him or herself. Who am I kidding? This is not a woman. They just keep running in circles. People will ask them about the fighters being old, and they'll say that they aren't technically drafted and signed. People are asking them about the weight classes, which are atrocious. It would have been better to just make these people fight at different weight classes instead of shifting them over and changing the names. And they're doing this in the name of fighter safety. Cool. I don't love extreme weight cutting either. But you know what else would help with fighter safety? Not signing old, punch-drunk fighters. But they're not signed yet. Yeah, well, even having them in the draft pool, having them eligible, is a waste of time then. Or they could have even followed through with hydration tests on like one championship, and then they'll circle back to, but they aren't signed, and they have to pass a pre-fight medical. And they're consenting adults. I'm so sick of that. Consenting adults. It's just an excuse. Grow a backbone. No, Vanderlei Silva will not be fighting in our organization because he very recently told a judge that he is riddled with CTE. And then they'll show up under anything related to the UFC and fighter pay and fighter satisfaction, like an annoying little game of whack-a-mole. Regardless of who is at fault, we are set to provide an option where fighters get 50% of the revenue. 50% of zero is still zero. You're unproven. You can't go around here making these kinds of claims, big guy. Patricio Pitbull wants out of his contract with Bellator. Technically PFL because they killed Bellator. Murder-suicide, baby. And guess what GFL Twitter has to say? The GFL was designed to avoid these kinds of issues. Contract negotiations? Holding fighters hostage? I'm sure they're going to do it eventually. That's my question. Who is going to be the first one to be disgruntled with the GFL? That's a good sign that an organization is doing well when someone becomes disgruntled. Luke Rockhold, maybe the fight time is eating into his work as a model, something like that. Or when he's off harassing women, they're like, hey, you can't do this. You can't make these kinds of comments about women, Luke. And he's like, I don't fucking care. I'm from Florida, or I'm from California. Florida, California. Same thing. I'm from a coast. I like to surf, and I'm hot. A report came out that alleges that they are paying a former UFC heavyweight champion over $1 million per fight. So that is either Andrei Arlovski, Fabricio Verdum, or JDS. I don't know if any of them are good enough fighters or even big enough draws to warrant that kind of paycheck. Another former UFC heavyweight champion, Cain Velasquez, signed as a team manager. I suspect that that's the role that a bunch of these old guys are going to get. A bunch of the old guys that aren't drafted, maybe Vanderlei Silva won't fight. That would be my guess, is they're just doing this to get some name value and pop a rating. And then we come to find out that Arlovski's just coaching Team Belarus. Belarus? Is that where he's from? Yes, he is from Belarus. Cain got signed along with Javier Mendez, head coach at AKA, so I have a feeling that given their locations, we're going to get a team in California. It was kind of a given anyways, given how prevalent it is down there. That makes a lot of sense. But you know what doesn't make sense? The fact that we were supposed to get team announcements in early January, now we're in mid-January with no teams, or even a date for the teams being announced. At this rate, it wouldn't surprise me if the GFL gets postponed again. Even looking back at their oldest tweets in 2022, they are arguing about Israel Adesanya only making $4 million, when Jake Paul says he should be making $7 million. Yes, because Jake Paul is the financial guru that every major organization needs to be listening to. Their other early tweet here is about how they were on track for a 2023 launch. Now we're in 2025 and things aren't quite lining up well. Investor checks are bouncing, and unlike Brandon Royval, people are pulling out. Okay, so I'm coming at you guys from post-production because the day that this video was supposed to release, the GFL proved me wrong. They announced the team locations as well as the personnel involved, so let's run through that quickly. Cain Velasquez and Javier Mendez are not a part of a team in California, but a team in Dubai. Very interesting. Vanderlei Silva is managing Team Los Angeles alongside Rafael Cordero. Lyoto Machida is paired up with Andre Pederneiras. I probably butchered that name. He coached Jose Aldo, Renan Barao, and BJ Penn. Team London is headed up by Sean Strickland victim Luke Barnett, as well as Carl Prince, who is Lerone Murphy's coach. The New York team doesn't have a manager yet and is coached by Ray Longo. So it's pretty obvious that was one of their marketing strategies: build outrage, build controversy by signing these old fighters, and then hit us with a little bait and switch by signing them to management deals. Since we last checked in on them, they have added a couple of fighters to their draft pool. Officially, Ovent St. Preux and Paige Van Zandt were a couple of days ago, but the morning of January 16th, alongside the teams, we got announcements of Shogun Hua, Yoel Romero, Chad Mendez, Douglas Lima, and Todd Duffy. These are okay names. Shogun doesn't really sound appealing, but Mendez and Romero do pique my interest. There have also been rumors of a couple of other signings. Rashad Evans was part of the GFL roster for about a week, and then he was removed from the roster page. I think this might have something to do with him boxing Rampage Jackson. Might also have something to do with the fact that he is currently employed by the UFC or ESPN, but they're kind of linked. Kevin Lee says that Tony Ferguson is currently in talks with the GFL. He wants to rematch Tony. I won't let it happen. Okay, I'll jump in the cage. I'll suicide bomb. No, that was a joke. I wouldn't risk Tony's life like that. I would just shoot Kevin Lee dead. Holly Holm has just left the UFC and is quote-unquote exploring free agency. Maybe has she fought Tanya Evinger before? That feels like a fight that's happened. They're both over the hill. They're both like 45 years old. Combined age of 90 years old. Wow, first time ever. Oh, maybe not. Bellator is dead. There's an opening now to be a B-tier organization. But that isn't good enough for these people. They can't just be the UFC, but slightly worse. They have to be the UFC, but slightly worse, with a gimmick. And people have been on my ass. Oh, you don't want competition. What are you, some kind of UFC bootlicker? Who came up with this shit, bootlicker? There's way better insults on the internet. Crotch sniffer, like Jorge Masvidal. That's funny. Bootlicker. Paints a picture, doesn't it? Well, listen here, bitch. I'm sick of your shit. Competition creates growth and change in an industry. This will not be competitive. At most, this will be competitive for 1 to 2 seasons. And then the novelty wears off, the big names retire or even die at this rate. We're getting pretty up there. And then you're just another IFL or Elite XC or even, shoot me now, Golden Boy Promotions. And that makes other new MMA startups look bad. PFL has all the money in the world. They have Saudi oil money, they have Greasy Don Davis money, they're combining all their powers, and they also have a decent talent pool. Lots of UFC rejects, lots of people on the ends of UFC fighter highlight reels, and PFL is still barely staying afloat. They cut their prize money in half, and they're ditching the tournament format for a more traditional Grand Prix, because that's what works. The UFC has been in business for 30 years. I'm sure if they figured out somewhere they did a boardroom meeting or a test screening of something and they said, hey, would you guys be interested in team MMA or a season-long tournament? I'm sure they contemplated this at one point or another and they said, no, that wouldn't be feasible. But everybody thinks they're smarter than the UFC. Oh, I finally found the opening that nobody else has ever found. That's gonna make me rich, baby. Rich beyond my wildest dreams. Scrooge McDuck, money pit, swimming for days. My message to the GFL. Stop reinventing the goddamn wheel. It's round for a reason. Try to run this format without grabbing a bunch of nostalgia. Try to do all the things you're doing with insurance and a tournament system with young, hungry, debuting fighters. Build something instead of relying on nostalgia acts, cheap pops that are there for a couple of fights and then they maybe get injured or they're too old and then they're gone forever. Now feels like a great time to announce that on January 24th, I will be doing a companion live stream of the inaugural GFL draft, mostly just to make fun of it. I'd greatly appreciate if some of you stopped by as well, because if I had to watch it alone, I'd probably end up throwing myself out of a window. Like, comment, and subscribe so I can achieve my dream of being the #1 GFL YouTuber on the planet. Watch the previous video on the GFL if you haven't already. I'll put it in the corner up there. I'll put it in the description. I'll put it everywhere. You can't miss it. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a good time.